Ladies and gentlemen, we live in an age of unprecedented conflict over values, ideals, and identity. Amid this chaos, a critical question looms: what happens when the sacred becomes the political? To address this, we must delve deep into human nature, history, and the very structure of our societies. The sacred, those principles we hold as untouchable, eternal, and absolute, is the bedrock upon which civilizations are built. These are not just abstract notions, they are the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of existence, the values that give life its meaning. Justice, freedom, dignity, these are sacred. But the sacred, by its very nature, is inflexible. It is uncompromising. And therein lies the tension when it collides with the political. Politics, by contrast, is the art of compromise. It is the messy, imperfect mechanism by which we negotiate competing interests in the real world. Its purpose is not purity, but coexistence, a system designed to prevent chaos by making room for disagreement. When the sacred becomes political, something profound and often dangerous happens. Sacred values, when brought into the political sphere, demand absolute allegiance. They leave no room for dissent or nuance. This transforms politics from a space of negotiation into a battleground of moral certainties. The result: polarization. We no longer see our opponents as people with different perspectives, but as heretics, enemies to be defeated, rather than fellow citizens to be engaged. History offers no shortage of warnings. Consider revolutions that began with sacred ideals of equality and justice, but ended in tyranny and bloodshed. The French Revolution sought liberty but gave rise to the guillotine. Theocracies throughout history have imposed their sacred visions of truth, often at the cost of freedom and human dignity. Why does this happen? Because the sacred, when wedded to power, becomes corrupt. What begins as a noble ideal transforms into a tool for domination. The sacred ceases to inspire, it begins to control. And those who wield it are no longer humble servants of truth, but architects of oppression. Yet, it is equally important to recognize that some of the greatest advances in human history came when sacred values challenged unjust political systems. The civil rights movement in the United States, driven by a sacred belief in the equality of all people, reshaped a nation. But even these victories required leaders who understood the dangers of moral absolutism and embraced the pragmatic realities of political struggle. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a profound responsibility. The sacred is essential. It inspires, unites, and gives life meaning. But when we bring it into politics, we must do so with great caution. We must recognize that no single group or ideology holds a monopoly on truth. We must approach the sacred with humility, aware of our own fallibility and the diversity of human experience. If we fail to strike this balance, we risk losing both the sacred and the political. We risk a world where dialogue becomes impossible, where compromise is seen as weakness, and where power becomes an end in itself. But if we succeed, if we approach the sacred with care and respect the pluralism of the political, we may yet build a society that honors both the transcendent and the practical. A society where sacred values inspire justice without becoming weapons of division. The choice, as always, is ours. Thank you. The sacred occupies a unique and profound place in human life. It represents those elements of existence that transcend the mundane, the negotiable, and the transactional. To understand the sacred is to understand what we, as individuals and as societies, hold most dear. These are the principles, beliefs, and values that define the core of our humanity: justice, freedom, compassion, dignity, and the pursuit of truth. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're the foundation upon which cultures, civilizations, and moral systems are built. The sacred provides us with a framework for meaning. It gives coherence to the chaos of existence and allows us to see beyond ourselves to something greater, something that demands reverence and devotion. From the dawn of human history, the sacred has been a guiding force, shaping societies and their moral compasses. For ancient peoples, the sacred was often tied to religion or mythology. Gods, spirits, and divine forces served as the arbiters of right and wrong, and sacred rituals became the means of maintaining harmony within the cosmos and society. Over time, the sacred expanded beyond the realm of religion. It began to manifest in the form of universal ideals, concepts like justice, equality, and human rights that underpin modern society. These ideals carry a weight and authority that demand our allegiance, not because they are enforced by law, but because they resonate deeply within our moral intuitions. To violate the sacred is to transgress against something fundamentally human. What makes the sacred so powerful is its inviolability. It is not up for debate or negotiation. It exists as a moral absolute, a standard by which all else is judged. This unyielding nature gives it a unique capacity to inspire action and unify people. Sacred ideals often serve as the rallying cries for movements that seek to right wrongs, correct injustices, or create a better world. They have the power to mobilize entire populations, often against overwhelming odds. Consider the struggles for freedom against tyranny, the fight for equality against systemic oppression, or the pursuit of justice in the face of corruption. These movements are animated by sacred convictions, by the belief that there are values so fundamental that they must be defended at all costs. Yet the sacred is not without its challenges. Its power lies in its absoluteness, but that same quality can make it rigid, inflexible, and uncompromising. The sacred demands purity, and purity leaves little room for the complexities of human life. It exists in the realm of ideals, untouched by the practical realities of the world. This tension between the sacred and the pragmatic is an unavoidable part of human existence. We need the sacred to inspire us and guide us, but we also need to recognize its limitations. To understand the sacred is to recognize its profound role in shaping who we are, but also to approach it with a sense of humility, aware of its capacity to both unite and divide. Politics, at its core, is the mechanism through which human beings organize themselves, resolve disputes, and build structures to manage society. It is the arena where competing interests meet and ideally find common ground. Unlike the sacred, which often operates in the realm of absolutes, politics thrives on negotiation and compromise. It is a process that recognizes the inherent diversity of human perspectives and seeks to mediate between them in a way that allows for coexistence. This is not a perfect process, far from it, but its imperfection is what makes it functional. Politics is messy, contentious, and often frustrating, but it reflects the reality that human beings are not uniform in their desires, values, or goals. It exists not to enforce purity, but to create a space where differences can be managed without resorting to violence or tyranny. The essence of politics is pragmatism. It is about finding solutions that work in the real world, even if those solutions are imperfect or temporary. This is why compromise is at the heart of the political process. In a political system, no single group or individual can have everything they want. Instead, they must engage with others, consider opposing viewpoints, and arrive at decisions that, while not ideal for everyone, are acceptable enough to maintain social harmony. This requires a willingness to bend, to listen, and to recognize the legitimacy of perspectives that differ from one's own. In this sense, politics is inherently pluralistic. It acknowledges that there is no single correct way to organize society, but rather a multitude of possibilities that must be balanced against one another. However, this pragmatism can also make politics frustrating for those who hold deep convictions. For individuals or groups with strong ideological commitments, the compromises inherent in politics can feel like betrayals of their values. This is especially true when those values are seen as sacred, as inviolable principles that must not be diluted or negotiated. Politics, with its emphasis on practicality and compromise, can seem at odds with the moral clarity of the sacred. Yet, it is precisely this difference that allows politics to function in a diverse and often divided society. By creating a space where no single vision of the good can dominate entirely, politics provides a mechanism for peaceful coexistence. This does not mean that politics is morally neutral or devoid of values. On the contrary, political systems are often shaped by deeply held beliefs about justice, fairness, and the common good. But these values are applied in a way that allows for adaptation and change. Politics is not static, it evolves in response to new challenges, shifting demographics, and changing cultural norms. This flexibility is one of its greatest strengths, but it can also be a source of tension when it comes into contact with the sacred, which resists such change. Politics is therefore not just about power or governance, it is about the ongoing effort to reconcile competing values and interests in a way that allows society to move forward, even if imperfectly. When the sacred collides with the political, it creates a profound tension that reshapes both realms in often unpredictable ways. The sacred, by its nature, is steadfast and unyielding. It represents values or beliefs that are seen as transcendent and non-negotiable, existing above the fray of ordinary human conflict. Politics, on the other hand, is a domain that thrives on pragmatism, flexibility, and the ability to navigate disagreement. When these two spheres intersect, the collision often creates a volatile and charged environment, as the sacred resists compromise while politics demands it. The sacred's entry into the political realm elevates the stakes of political debates. Issues that might have once been treated as practical problems to solve become matters of ultimate importance. When sacred values underpin political arguments, they transform the nature of the discussion. Opponents are no longer merely people with differing perspectives, they become adversaries of the sacred itself, enemies of what is held to be fundamentally right and just. This dynamic makes compromise exceedingly difficult, as yielding on such issues is perceived not as a practical concession, but as a betrayal of something far greater. Political disagreements become moral battles, and the possibility of finding common ground diminishes. This dynamic is particularly evident in moments of cultural or ideological upheaval. When a society is divided over issues tied to sacred values, the political discourse often grows more hostile and polarized. Take, for instance, debates over human rights, environmental protection, or religious freedom. These are not merely questions of policy but of principle, and each side often believes they are fighting for something essential and inviolable. This can be inspiring as it brings moral passion and clarity to political engagement. However, it also risks deepening divisions, as the absolutism of the sacred leaves little room for dialogue or mutual understanding. The political domain, for its part, is ill-equipped to handle the uncompromising nature of the sacred. Politics requires negotiation, the balancing of interests, and the recognition that no one group can impose its vision entirely on the rest. When the sacred becomes political, it disrupts this delicate balance. It transforms the political sphere from a space of negotiation into a battlefield where there can be no winners, only victors and vanquished. This dynamic undermines the very purpose of politics, which is to mediate conflict and create structures that allow diverse communities to coexist. Moreover, when sacred values enter politics, they risk being co-opted or distorted. In the hands of political actors, the sacred can become a tool for gaining power, rather than a genuine expression of moral conviction. Leaders may invoke sacred principles not out of true belief but as a means of rallying support or silencing opposition. This can erode the integrity of the sacred itself, reducing it to a weapon in the pursuit of political goals. In such cases, neither the sacred nor the political emerges unscathed. The collision of these realms creates a dynamic that is both powerful and perilous, reshaping the way we engage with the most fundamental questions of human existence. When the sacred enters the political realm, one of the most immediate and profound effects is the polarization of society. The sacred represents values and beliefs that are regarded as inviolable, absolute, and deeply tied to personal and collective identity. These values, by their nature, are not open to negotiation or compromise. They carry a moral weight that demands allegiance and often invokes strong emotional responses. Politics, however, is a domain where negotiation is essential, where competing interests must coexist, and where decisions must accommodate the diversity of human experience. The collision between these two spheres creates a combustible environment in which polarization becomes almost inevitable. Sacred values elevate political disputes into moral confrontations. When one side of a political argument claims to represent what is sacred, the opposition is no longer seen as a group with differing priorities or perspectives. It is perceived as a threat to the sacred itself. In such a dynamic, political opponents are not just wrong, they are morally deficient, even dangerous. This framing heightens the stakes of political engagement, as it transforms policy disagreements into existential struggles. Each side believes it is fighting for something fundamental, something that cannot be compromised. This sense of moral urgency fuels division, as the space for dialogue and mutual understanding shrinks. The effects of this polarization ripple through every aspect of society. Communities become fractured along ideological lines, with individuals increasingly retreating into echo chambers where their sacred values are affirmed and opposing views are demonized. Social cohesion erodes as people begin to see their neighbors, coworkers, and even family members as adversaries in a moral battle. The polarization is further amplified by media and political leaders who capitalize on the sacred to rally their base, often portraying complex issues in black and white terms that leave little room for nuance or empathy. This dynamic fosters an us versus them mentality that deepens divisions and makes reconciliation increasingly difficult. Historically, the politicization of the sacred has often led to periods of intense societal conflict. Whether in the form of religious wars, ideological revolutions, or cultural clashes, the merging of sacred values with political agendas has repeatedly polarized populations and in some cases led to violence. The rigidity of sacred values makes them ill-suited for the give and take required in political processes. When sacred ideals dominate the political landscape, compromise is seen as betrayal, and those who seek middle ground are often marginalized or attacked by both sides. This polarization also undermines the practical functioning of political systems. Institutions designed to mediate conflicts and facilitate governance become paralyzed by ideological divisions. Decision-making stalls as politicians prioritize loyalty to sacred principles over pragmatic solutions. The public loses trust in these institutions, viewing them not as neutral arbiters but as battlegrounds for competing sacred visions. This erosion of trust further entrenches polarization, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. The emotional intensity of sacred values can inspire positive change, but when weaponized in politics, they deepen divides, making collaboration and progress nearly impossible. In such an environment, the sacred ceases to unite and instead becomes a source of fragmentation, pulling people further apart instead of bringing them together. When the sacred becomes intertwined with the political, the tension between moral certainty and practical governance becomes one of the most significant challenges. The sacred represents ideals and values that are considered absolute, eternal, and non-negotiable. These are the principles that inspire individuals and societies to strive for justice, truth, and meaning. They are rooted in a profound sense of right and wrong, often derived from religious, philosophical, or cultural traditions, and demand unwavering loyalty. Politics, on the other hand, is the art of navigating complexity, balancing competing interests, and making decisions within an imperfect, ever-changing world. It requires compromise, adaptability, and an acceptance of ambiguity. When sacred values enter the political sphere, the collision between moral certainty and practical necessity creates profound challenges that can destabilize both domains. Moral certainty, while powerful and inspiring, leaves little room for the flexibility that politics requires. When individuals or groups bring their sacred values into political debates, they often do so with a sense of absolute conviction. They see their cause as inherently just and their perspective as unquestionably correct. This moral clarity can be a source of strength, galvanizing movements and inspiring people to fight for justice and change. However, it can also lead to rigidity, as those who hold sacred values may resist any attempt to negotiate or compromise. For them, yielding even slightly on these principles feels like a betrayal of something fundamental. This rigidity creates an impasse in the political arena, where progress often depends on the ability to find common ground and reconcile competing priorities. The political sphere, by contrast, is inherently pragmatic. It is not driven solely by ideals, but by the practical realities of governance. Politicians must contend with limited resources, competing interests, and the need to maintain stability in diverse societies. Decisions are rarely black and white. They often involve trade-offs and incremental progress rather than sweeping moral victories. In this context, the absolutism of the sacred can be deeply disruptive. It elevates political disputes into moral conflicts, making compromise appear not just undesirable but morally wrong. This dynamic undermines the collaborative spirit necessary for effective governance and fosters polarization, as opposing sides dig in their heels and refuse to engage with one another. Moreover, when sacred values dominate political discourse, they can overshadow other important considerations. Practical issues such as economic policy, infrastructure development, and public health may take a backseat to ideological battles. Leaders may focus more on signaling their commitment to sacred ideals than on addressing the complex, day-to-day challenges of governance. This can lead to inefficiency and gridlock as political institutions become paralyzed by ideological conflicts that resist resolution. At the same time, the infusion of moral certainty into politics can alienate those who do not share the same sacred values. In diverse societies, individuals hold a wide range of beliefs and priorities. When one group's sacred values are elevated above all others, it can create a sense of exclusion and marginalization among those who do not align with those values. This erodes trust in political systems and deepens social divisions, making it even harder to achieve the consensus needed for effective governance. History provides countless examples of what happens when the sacred becomes entangled with the political, revealing both its potential for transformative change and its capacity for destruction. When sacred values are introduced into political movements or institutions, they bring with them a profound moral force that can inspire people to challenge oppression, fight for justice, or demand change in the face of overwhelming odds. However, these same values, when wielded without caution or humility, have often led to devastating consequences, from the subjugation of dissent to the erosion of the very principles they were meant to uphold. One of the most striking examples of sacred ideals driving positive political change is the civil rights movement in the United States. Anchored in deeply held beliefs about human dignity, equality, and justice, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. framed their struggle as a moral and spiritual battle, rooted in the sacred idea that all people are created equal. By invoking these transcendent principles, they inspired millions and helped reshape the social and political landscape of the nation. The movement's success demonstrated the power of the sacred to elevate politics beyond mere pragmatism and toward profound societal transformation. However, even in such a noble cause, compromises were necessary, and its leaders understood the importance of balancing moral conviction with practical strategies to achieve incremental progress. In contrast, history is also replete with cautionary tales of how the politicization of the sacred can lead to tyranny and oppression. The French Revolution, for example, began with sacred ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. These principles were initially a rallying cry for those seeking to dismantle an unjust monarchy and create a more equitable society. However, as the revolution unfolded, these sacred ideals became increasingly absolutist. The pursuit of purity led to the Reign of Terror, during which thousands were executed in the name of protecting the revolution's values. What began as a movement for justice devolved into a regime of fear and violence, illustrating how the sacred, when fused with political power, can be corrupted and weaponized. Similarly, theocratic regimes throughout history have demonstrated the dangers of merging sacred values with political authority. When religious principles become indistinguishable from the mechanisms of governance, dissent is often treated not as a political disagreement, but as heresy. This dynamic stifles debate, suppresses pluralism, and concentrates power in the hands of those who claim to speak for the sacred. The result is often a rigid and oppressive system that betrays the very values it seeks to uphold. In such cases, the sacred loses its transformative potential and becomes a tool of control. The lessons of history underscore the complexity of intertwining the sacred with the political. While sacred ideals have the power to inspire movements that challenge injustice and demand accountability, they also carry the risk of becoming authoritarian when wielded without restraint. The key lies in understanding the balance between moral conviction and the realities of governance, recognizing that even the most sacred principles can be corrupted when pursued without humility or regard for human diversity. When sacred values are introduced into the political sphere, one of the most profound risks is the corruption of the sacred itself. The sacred, by its nature, represents principles, beliefs, or ideals that are considered untouchable and transcendent. These values inspire people, guiding their moral compass and serving as the foundation for their sense of meaning and purpose. However, when sacred ideals become entangled with political power, their purity and integrity are often compromised. Instead of being a source of genuine inspiration and moral clarity, the sacred can become a tool for manipulation, control, and the pursuit of political agendas. The very act of aligning sacred values with political power exposes them to the corrupting influence of human ambition and self-interest. Politics, by its nature, is a domain of pragmatism and competition. It involves the negotiation of interests, the exercise of authority, and the pursuit of influence. In this environment, sacred ideals are often reshaped to serve political goals. Leaders and institutions may invoke the sacred not out of genuine conviction, but as a means of rallying support, consolidating power, or silencing dissent. This instrumentalization of the sacred strips it of its authentic moral force, reducing it to a mere tool of political strategy. As sacred values are co-opted by political agendas, their meaning and significance often become distorted. What begins as a genuine expression of moral truth can be transformed into a rigid, dogmatic ideology. The sacred becomes a weapon, wielded to delegitimize opponents and enforce conformity. This dynamic is particularly evident in cases where religious or ideological beliefs are intertwined with political authority. History offers numerous examples of regimes and movements that have used sacred principles to justify authoritarianism, discrimination, or violence. In such cases, the original essence of the sacred, its capacity to inspire compassion, justice, and understanding, is lost, replaced by a narrower, more oppressive interpretation. The corruption of the sacred through its politicization also undermines its ability to unite and uplift people. Sacred values, when genuinely expressed, have the power to transcend differences and bring individuals together around a shared vision of the good. However, when these values are tied to political agendas, they become sources of division rather than unity. different groups lay claim to the sacred, each asserting that their interpretation is the true and rightful one. This competition over the sacred deepens polarization, creating a fragmented society where dialogue and cooperation are increasingly difficult. Moreover, the politicization of the sacred can erode trust in both sacred institutions and political systems. When people see sacred ideals being used cynically for political gain, they may become disillusioned with the values themselves. This disillusionment can lead to a broader sense of moral and social cynicism as individuals lose faith in the possibility of genuine moral leadership. At the same time, political institutions that align themselves too closely with sacred values risk alienating those who do not share those beliefs, undermining their legitimacy and ability to govern effectively. Ultimately, the fusion of the sacred with the political risks corrupting both realms. It diminishes the authenticity and transformative power of the sacred while undermining the pragmatism and pluralism that are essential to effective governance. In doing so, it leaves society divided and disillusioned, with neither the sacred nor the political able to fulfill its true purpose. Reclaiming the balance between the sacred and the political is one of the most challenging yet essential tasks for societies seeking to navigate the complexities of modern life. The sacred, with its capacity to inspire and provide moral direction, serves as an invaluable compass for individuals and communities. The political, with its pragmatic mechanisms for resolving conflict and organizing society, ensures the practical functioning of collective life. However, when these two spheres become overly entangled, their purposes often clash, leading to polarization, corruption, and a breakdown of trust. To restore balance, it is necessary to understand the boundaries of each and to foster a relationship that allows them to complement rather than undermine one another. The first step in reclaiming this balance is recognizing the distinct roles that the sacred and the political play. The sacred operates in the realm of meaning and values, offering a vision of what is worth striving for, a moral ideal or a higher purpose. Its strength lies in its ability to transcend the immediate and the temporal, grounding individuals and societies in principles that endure beyond shifting circumstances. The political, by contrast, exists to mediate the practical realities of coexistence. It acknowledges the diversity of human experience and seeks to create structures that accommodate different needs and perspectives. While the sacred speaks to what ought to be, the political is concerned with what can be achieved in a complex and imperfect world. To reclaim balance, it is crucial to prevent the sacred from being co-opted as a tool of political power. When sacred values are appropriated for political purposes, they lose their transcendent quality and become subject to the same compromises, manipulations, and power struggles that define politics. This diminishes their ability to inspire genuine moral action and reduces them to instruments of division. Safeguarding the sacred requires maintaining its independence from political agendas, ensuring that it remains a source of guidance, rather than a weapon for advancing particular interests. This can be achieved by fostering a culture of respect for pluralism, where different sacred beliefs are allowed to coexist without being imposed on others through political means. At the same time, the political sphere must be protected from the absolutism of the sacred. Effective governance depends on the ability to negotiate, compromise, and adapt to changing circumstances. When sacred values dominate political discourse, they often create an environment where dialogue and cooperation are replaced by ideological rigidity and moral condemnation. To avoid this, political institutions must emphasize the importance of pragmatism and inclusivity. This does not mean abandoning moral principles, but rather applying them in ways that acknowledge the complexity and diversity of human society. Education plays a vital role in reclaiming this balance. By fostering critical thinking and moral reflection, individuals can learn to appreciate the value of both the sacred and the political without conflating the two. This requires cultivating a mindset that respects the moral clarity of the sacred while embracing the pragmatism of the political. It also involves encouraging open dialogue and mutual understanding, creating spaces where people can engage with differing perspectives without resorting to hostility or division. Reclaiming the balance is not about diminishing the importance of either the sacred or the political, but about ensuring that each fulfills its unique role. The sacred provides the moral vision that inspires us to strive for a better world, while the political offers the tools to navigate the complexities of bringing that vision to life. By respecting the boundaries and purposes of each, societies can harness the strengths of both, creating a dynamic that fosters both inspiration and practical progress. When the sacred becomes the political, it elevates the stakes of governance and societal discourse to a level that is both inspiring and perilous. The sacred, rooted in transcendent values, provides the moral compass that guides human aspirations, while the political, grounded in pragmatism, creates the framework for coexistence in a diverse and imperfect world. When these two realms collide, the result is often a volatile mix of moral clarity and practical complexity that can inspire profound change, but also deepen divisions, erode trust, and corrupt both sacred ideals and political processes. History teaches us that while the sacred can energize movements and instill a sense of purpose, its fusion with politics often transforms the dynamics of compromise and negotiation into battles of moral absolutism. Sacred values, when misused as instruments of political power, lose their unifying and transcendent force, becoming divisive tools that polarize societies and undermine the principles they claim to uphold. Conversely, politics, when overrun by the rigidity of sacred ideals, becomes paralyzed by dogmatism, unable to adapt to the realities of governance and pluralism. The task, then, is not to reject the interplay between the sacred and the political, but to manage it wisely. Societies must honor the sacred as a source of moral vision, while protecting the political sphere as a space for pluralistic dialogue and pragmatic solutions. This balance demands humility, critical reflection, and a commitment to fostering both shared values and respectful coexistence. Only by maintaining this equilibrium can we ensure that the sacred continues to inspire, the political continues to function, and both contribute to a society that is just dynamic and capable of meeting the challenges of our time.